What's up, gamers? This is Pace, and Larian just announced patch 8 for Baldur's Gate 3 in the community update. A few hours ago, they announced that patch 8 is going to be coming with a lot of new features. Very interesting. You can read through the community update yourself, of course. In this video, I'm not going to go through everything. I'm just going to announce the main features kind of quickly. And then focus on the 12 new subclasses that have been announced. All right, let's get going. First of all, they'll be introducing crossplay between consoles and PC and also Mac. So between PS5, PC, and Mac users and Xbox, crossplay is going to come. A lot of players obviously wanted this, and it's great that it's finally coming. All right, subclasses. I'm going to talk about this a lot in a second. Let's skip it for now. You can already see shiny GIFs or GIFs for both. Photo mode. So this is sort of the big feature, or like the second big feature, I guess, next to the subclasses. You can create all sorts of photos in a dedicated UI. Where you can, like put all the characters exactly how you want, zoom in, zoom out, add cat filters, add whatever, right? Maybe make them like redder, like, whatever, right? You can do all kinds of goofy and funny stuff with it. There's a lot of examples here. You can already see where this is going. Post-processing effects, probably only to the photo mode as far as I can see, not necessarily just as standard graphics settings as it appears. And you can add frames and stickers and whatnot, right? So you can kind of like TikTokify your Baldur's Gate 3 experience. Interesting, funny, goofy, sure. Not necessarily the feature I was waiting for the most, but certainly a lot of players are gonna love this, and there's gonna be a lot of funny stuff that's gonna come from it for sure. All right, patch 8 stress test. So there will be a stress test coming for this patch, and they announced that it will begin in early January. And the stress test will be available to Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. And I guess one of the big focuses of the stress test will be to test the cross-platform implementation. But so they're not super specific on what exactly they want to stress test, or rather they say that they kind of want to stress test all of the features that have been named. So they're not actually, so the goal is to go beyond our internal testing and help us catch things before they can become an issue once a patch has been released. Also, they say where you can jump in and try out the new subclasses, explore tabs, best angles in photo mode. So that's actually the part that I was looking for, where you can see that they're apparently not just focusing on the cross-platform features, but rather on all of the features that have been named here. When does the stress test begin? In early January, and there will be another community update, 31, where they'll announce how to sign up for the stress test. So yeah, I guess stay tuned for that. Also, they have been nominated, Larian has been nominated, or Baldur's Gate 3, I guess, has been nominated for the Best Community Support Award at the Game Awards 2024, and you can, if you want, you can vote for Baldur's Gate 3 by following this link until December 11th. I'd say a pretty well-deserved nomination for sure. All right, let's get into the subclasses and look at what's going on here. So, basically, every single class is getting one dedicated subclass. And these subclasses all in some shape or form already exist in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And I've been looking, as you can see here with the tabs above, I've been sort of looking roughly at what these subclasses, how they work in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and then kind of did some rough comparison with how they're teased here. These are just teasers. You get like a rough idea of what these subclasses do. And from what I could identify, is that some of them are quite close to what the subclasses do in 5th edition. And some of them are much more probably Larian's own take, kind of more their own homebrew idea of how such a class would look like. Some things that are, kind of in Dungeons and Dragons are also just kind of very difficult to implement, of course, into Baldur's Gate, sometimes because they're maybe a bit more RP heavy and can't really be part of a single player experience and stuff. But overall, I got the impression that they're trying to be quite close still to what is possible in or what is given by the 5th edition rules. But there are also some exceptions where they're going a lot more with their own ideas. So let's go through them one by one, and I'll talk a little bit what my observations were in my little period of research. So the College of Glamour Bard. I'm just going to read the text first. As a College of Glamour Bard, you'll find you have the power to heal friends and command enemies in equal measure. Cast Mantle of Inspiration to bestow your allies with 5 temporary hit points. And should an enemy attack while it's cast, they'll find themselves charmed. So Mantle of Inspiration is basically like Bardic Inspiration. You can put it as a bonus action on allies. As you can see here, you can see in the GIF that you can use it on several targets at once. The GIF's resolution is not really high enough to see if that costs more than 1 charge of Bardic Inspiration or as many as you choose targets for, but I guess that's maybe a little bit too much detail to ask for. Maybe that's not super important right now. But you can see that basically you cast this Mantle of Inspiration on allies, and then if they gain 5 temporary hit points, that will scale, of course, a little bit as you level up. And then if someone hits them, they become charmed, which, as far as I could see, is not exactly how it works in 5th edition. Then another ability that is teased is play your hand correctly, and you'll be able to use this to your advantage with Mantle of Majesty. Target charmed enemies, and you can command them to flee, move closer, freeze to the ground, or drop their weapon. So basically, targets hit. So if one of your allies with Mantle of Inspiration is hit, they become charmed, and then if they're charmed, you can use command, which is basically most likely that's gonna be Mantle of Inspiration. Mantle of Majesty is something that you cast on yourself, and then as a bonus action, you get to cast command on targets that are already charmed. Interesting to see how exactly this will work. And I'd say also interesting to see how this will play in comparison to a lore bard, right? Because this is very control focused, of course. This is a lot about charming and commanding, which are very, very strong crowd control spells and effects. But where it will be interesting to see how this differentiates itself from lore bard, which is already kind of a supporting class that is focused on crowd control. So interesting and definitely flavorful. Hopefully it's very flavorful. I think it will be. Bards are always flavorful, especially the lore bard, and I think this will also be just probably quite cool. Let's move on. The Barbarian, Path of Giants. So I'm going to read again and then talk a little bit about what I managed to figure out. Opt for the Path of Giants, and your newfound giant strength will make it easier for you to yeet friend and foe alike. Forget chugging potions to pump those muscles. These barbarians benefit from the Giant's Rage passive that grants both strength and size, allowing you to deal additional damage with throw attacks. Pockets weighing you down, not for you and your increased carry capacity. So, of course, barbarian throwing builds already existed, mostly as berserker barbarians, but this claims to be the sort of new dedicated throwing and kind of being large and strong subclass for the Barbarian. So the Path of Giants is a 5th edition subclass for the Barbarian, and it is kind of focused on the things that are named here. It can make itself larger and stronger. And being so, this is kind of already implemented in Baldur's Gate 3's mechanics, although it rarely matters, where stuff like size and weight influences what you can throw and like who can throw what, basically. So throwing creatures is sometimes can come up, right? And it's really cool to see a subclass that is focused on like throwing, and not just throwing weapons, but also, as it is teased here, also throwing people. That's just one of the funniest thing you can do, is sort of like the MMA builds, which were already kind of possible, right, with particularly barbarians, but that always felt a little bit like something was missing a little bit. What I would hope is that they would implement sort of like actual grappling mechanics. There are mods that do this. They're quite interesting, where like you actually get like proper grappling and pinning people down, and very, very fun stuff. I hope they go as far as this, as far as possible with this, and put as much goofy kind of MMA fighting stuff into it as possible, as much wrestling and whatever. So and that it doesn't end up just being another build like the Berserker Barbarian, where it's just every single turn you just throw, and that's it, right? You just throw the same spear 5 times in a row. That's I hope it's much more exciting than that. All right, Death Domain Cleric, another Cleric domain. As a Cleric of Death, you'll find a few dark new tricks up your sleeves, from spells that specialize in necrotic damage to 3 new necromancy cantrips. This includes Toll the Dead, a cantrip that causes 1 to 8 damage when your Cleric rings the Bell of Impending Doom, a number that's scaled if your target has already been damaged. We've also added the Homebrewed ability to explode nearby corpses, damaging enemies. Corpse Explosion. So the Cleric Death Domain is a subclass, Cleric domain in 5th edition, and it does roughly what is said here. You gain necromancy spells, so those are just added to your spell list, and most of the spells you would normally get from that spell list are already implemented in Baldur's Gate 3. And I think it's kind of unlikely that we're going to see new necromancy spells implemented this way, except for these cantrips that are mentioned here. So they mentioned 3 new necromancy cantrips. Not entirely sure which ones those could be. There are more than 3, and I'm not going to go through them now in detail. There are more than 3 that are candidates, basically. The one that they named, Toll the Dead, is pretty much exactly this way in Dungeons and Dragons, where it causes 1d8 damage, and then if the creature has already been damaged, I think it goes up to 1d12. So it's just a damaging cantrip. I think it's on a con save. So there you go. So like with most Cleric domains, this is not necessarily like completely defining the class, right? Cleric subclasses, Cleric domains are more like accents on top of the Cleric base, and not something that is completely defining the class that you play. So, but definitely an interesting new way to play the Cleric. All right, the Circle of Stars Druid. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot the most important thing. The corpse explosions. That is, of course, going to be very, very interesting. I'll be very much looking forward to seeing the corpse explosion feature and how they put that in. That is, as far as I can tell, not part of the 5th edition Death Domain Cleric. All right, the Circle of Stars Druid. This one is very, very interesting. So these druids look to the stars for answers, accessing powers beyond those offered through the classic wild shapes. Taking one of three starry forms for their power, the constellations of Archer, Chalice, and Dragon. Each one favors a different playstyle and strategy. The Archer dealing radiant damage with astral arrows, the life-giving Chalice restoring hit points to you and others nearby, and the Wise Dragon allowing you to deal damage with an added bonus to Constitution rolls. The starry forms offer not just a celestial aesthetic, but practical, powerful options to enhance your role as a healer, fighter, or strategist. So in 5th edition, this is quite complex, and they also scale a little bit. On later actions, you gain additional stuff on top. Basically, so if you can already kind of see how it works here in the GIF, tiny bit, right? So instead of going into a wild shape, you can also go into one of these starry forms where you turn. Well, you don't really see how it looks when you actually are in that form, right? The GIF ends before you actually press and cast a spell. But you basically can turn into something like I don't know, maybe like a sort of an astral body. And depending on what you pick, you gain additional abilities. So I think the way this will look is that the Archer will have a probably bonus action ranged spell attack where every single turn you can kind of like shoot for, let's say, 1d8 damage, like plink, right? On something, right? The Chalice will be additional healing. So when you heal someone, let's say you cast healing word on someone, then you get to cast another healing word on someone else. A little bit like that, right? Where you kind of multiply healing that you do a little. And then the Dragon, not entirely sure how this will turn out, especially as it says here that you deal damage. Added bonus to Constitution rolls. This is something that I think is the case in 5th edition, where you gain better Constitution saving throws, which means better concentration saving throws, so you're less likely to lose concentration on spells. Very interesting. Also, as I said, these scale and kind of there's more stuff kind of added as you go up in level to this. So very, very interesting like take on sort of a spell casting druid that is, I'd say, very much a mixture between support and I guess offensive spell casting. And kind of does that not by being in human form the entire time, right? A druid of the Circle of the Land, I think is the name, and Circle of Spores. These two druids tend to spend more time in the normal humanoid form, where they are just kind of like sitting around as normal humans. And it's only the moon druids that really go into shapeshifting a lot. Here, you don't go into shapeshifting a lot either. You go into these astral forms, which are still very spellcasting focused though, but give you these extra actions sort of on the side. Very interesting to see how exactly they'll implement this, and how exactly it will relate to the other subclasses. Next up, the Oath of the Crown Paladin. You've been sworn to uphold the principles of law, stay true to your oath, and you'll be rewarded with the power to aid your allies and disrupt your foes, guide your companions in battle with righteous clarity, taunt enemies with strategic interrupts, and keep your party standing strong with divine allegiance, absorbing their damage while restoring their health. So a new Paladin subclass with its own tenets, of course. So new fun ways to mess up your oath and pay the Oathbreaker Knight. You gain, I wasn't entirely able to figure out how this will work. So it seems to me like this is one of the classes where it's maybe a bit 50-50 on how close this will be to the subclass in D&D. So one thing that I could figure out quite clearly is how Divine Allegiance works. That's basically if your ally gets hit close to you, you get to actually just absorb the damage for them. You get to just like suck up the damage for them. So you're very much kind of like tank. And not by just by holding aggro basically, but by literally sucking up their damage. So beyond that, I wasn't able to fully figure it out. That being said, I think with this is probably similar to other Paladin subclasses, the others where like in the end, what those subclasses add to the Paladin is not that massive. If you think about it, right, like the different Paladin subclasses, the core of the class always stays the same. You're like, the dude with the sword and the shield, and you hit and you smite, and then you get a lot of like stuff on top that's sort of miscellaneous, right? That's not really super duper crucial. And I think it's not that different here. It's just a sort of different accent on how to play the paladin, not something entirely new. That's at least the impression I got. All right, the Arcane Archer Fighter. Mastering the dual arts of magic and marksmanship, the Arcane Archer subclass offers unique skills on top of new shooting animations, banish foes to the Feywild, removing them from the battlefield for a turn, or unleash psychic damage that forces enemies to make a wisdom saving throw or be blinded until the start of their next turn. So this is a dedicated fighter ranged class. Ranged fighter was a niche thing to do with, let's say, either by throwing on an Eldritch Knight or by playing a ranged Battle Master, which, is niche, but perfectly playable. Now you get a dedicated dedicated ranged fighter. Now, how they're putting they're only kind of, I think the way they're teasing this here is that they're giving you two examples where they are saying you, you can do something where you banish foes at range, and you can do something that blinds foes at range. I think in the end there will be a lot more different arrows. So the way this works in D&D 5th edition is that there's like 10 different ones. And as you level up, you get to choose several different ones of them step by step. So basically how the Battle Master fighter picks different Battle Master maneuvers as you level up. At level 3, you pick I think 3 of them. Then at level 7, I think you pick 2, and so on, right? So as you level up, you gain more and more and more. And especially early on, which ones you pick is quite impactful. And I'm expecting to see all kinds of different ones here. The GIF here is kind of interesting because you see an arrow that shoots and deals force damage in an AoE. So that is quite interesting to figure out like how exactly that will work. I don't think this is any of I don't think this is any of the arrows that are named here, right? With banishing and blinding, this doesn't seem to be this at all. So yeah, very much looking forward to this. That being said, it looks like it's just a standard weapon attack. It's very difficult to tell what exactly is happening here in this screen. It seems like it's just a standard weapon attack. There's like a very, very short, like 2 frames where you can see what is used, and it looks like it's just a standard weapon attack, maybe, but it's kind of hard to tell. In the end, a bit mysterious. We'll see what exactly will happen with this. Would definitely love it if there were a lot of different abilities to use. I think with the fighter, the Battle Master, it's by far, I'd say, the most interesting of the 3 fighter subclasses. I mean, it's my opinion, but that's how I see it. And would be really fun to see a dedicated fighter class that gets all sorts of different arrows and stuff and like this and that a lot of fun interactions. I think this game is best when it gives you options and when those options actually feel impactful in combat. And I think this subclass can definitely provide this. And also, definitely, there's going to be certainly lots of fun and very interesting multi-classing options with this class for sure, right? With Ranger and with Rogue and with Bard and so on, right? Very, very interesting. All right, Drunken Master Monk. Putting the brew in homebrew as the Drunken Master, you have the ability to consume alcohol straight from your inventory, as well as drink from bottles you see around the Sword Coast in order to recover ki. By sharing the bottle with your enemies using Intoxicating Strike, you'll generate a buff towards your armor class and your chance to hit drunk targets. Drunk enemies are also susceptible to the Drunken Master's other abilities like Sobering Realization. That's the post-nut clarity of Drunken Master, which sobers up drunk targets, dealing physical and psychic damage. All right. This is one of the subclasses that I couldn't really find out something very clear about. This subclass exists in 5th edition, but it feels to me like this is where Larian is really taking a lot of own ideas about how to make this class work and how it should function. First of all, consuming or recovering ki by drinking alcohol and stuff like that, that's nice. It's kind of more quality of life, I suppose. Depends a little bit on how you play the game. Nice. And then when it comes to combat, right, you can use this Intoxicating Strike attack that increases your armor class, so makes your defense better, and increases your chance to hit drunk targets. So Intoxicating Strike probably means that you're not intoxicating yourself, you're intoxicating your enemy. And thereby gain extra attack, like bonuses to your attack roll in some shape or form against them. Drunk enemies are also susceptible to the Drunken Master's other abilities, like Sobering Realization, which sobers up drunk targets, dealing physical and psychic damage. So what I can deduct from this is that you sort of have a rotation where you make a target drunk, thus gaining better or buffs to yourself and to your attack rolls, and then you can use the Sobering Realization in order to remove the drunk condition from them, and that way you deal physical and psychic damage to them. Quite interesting. You kind of get a combo sort of rotation kind of thing going. Will be interesting to see how this works out in practice. Next up, the Swarmkeeper Ranger. The Swarmkeeper subclass provides rangers with 3 kinds of deadly swarms to assist them in combat. The Cloud of Jellyfish deals extra lightning damage, potentially shocking your enemy. The Flurry of Moths deals psychic damage, giving you the potential to blind your enemy. The Legion of Bees deals piercing damage and forces the enemy to make a strength saving throw or be knocked back 15 feet. Each swarm also has the ability to provide you with teleportation capabilities! ! So this exists in 5th edition, and it's actually, as goofy as this stuff is, it seems to be a relatively, at least partially, quite, faithful implementation of how this works in 5th edition, including this teleportation stuff. You can actually see this really nicely here in this GIF, where, what happens in this GIF, right, is that the ranger has just hit this intellect devourer, and because they've hit it, they have now gained the option to do this teleportation thing. And what happens is that they teleport a short distance to the side horizontally, right? This is also how it works in 5th edition. It's a horizontal teleport to the side. Very goofy, and it's short range, so you kind of like do a zip. And the idea is sort of that you're kind of carried by a swarm of bees or something. It is very, very funny, and kind of memey. There are also spellcasting, right? There's spellcasting in this, and there will be some kind of like with the ranger in general, where you're one of these sort of half casting classes that gains spell slots slower and fewer spells as other classes. So I don't think this will ultimately be a spellcasting class like very heavily, and I'm not sure if these moths, bees, and everything will have a tremendous impact. So if they'll scale very heavily, I think you'll just always have these sort of small kind of added abilities because of them. Whether they will really scale heavily, we'll have to see. So definitely interesting to see how exactly they will implement this. I'd say Ranger is sadly one of the classes in this game that is a little bit. I mean, the previous subclasses are a little bit under designed, I guess, right? Where like it feels like there's something missing to them, like there's some play that's kind of missing, some combo, some stuff that you really like to do that goes a little bit beyond just kind of using the same one or two abilities. I hope that this subclass changes that a little bit. I'm not exactly getting that impression when I look at how exactly it works in 5th edition, but we'll have to wait and see. This is definitely interesting in the sense that it's kind of goofy, and let's hope that there is a lot more kind of interesting stuff coming to the Ranger with that subclass. All right, the Swashbuckler Rogue. This Rogue subclass introduces a range of new actions fit for the piratical life. Play dirty by tossing sand at the enemies to blind them, flick your weapon at a target to disarm them, or use your new fancy footwork passive while meleeing your enemy to ensure they can't make opportunity attacks against you for the rest of your turn. This also is a class that, when I looked it up a little bit, I couldn't quite find something that exactly fit this template when it came to Dungeons and Dragons rules. But this fancy footwork is certainly something that exists. Now, nothing here sounds like super extraordinary, right? I mean, melee, like do a melee attack on an enemy and then they can't do an opportunity attack. That is very close to like, basically gaining a disengage on your attack, which monks get, or, rogues already get bonus action disengage, so now they gain it directly on the attack. This is not something like crazy, right? And then, you get to blind enemies, you get to disarm enemies. In the end, relatively basic interactions, but we'll have to see how exactly it plays out. I would like for a rogue class to be a little bit more like involved, kind of a little bit more in depth, right? Some issue with the rogue class, especially the thief rogue and also the assassination rogue, is that you kind of gain everything that is good about this class at level 3, and then there is a lot of emptiness where nothing really happens to this class. And this is also when you see how people actually like how they use it in actual skill builds. There's a lot of 3 levels into rogue, right? There's a lot of 3 levels into especially thief in order to gain the second bonus action, and sneak attack and stuff, and bonus action dash and so on and so forth. But that's it, right? And I'd really like it if you gain a form of rogue that kind of spreads out its strengths a little bit more and has a little bit more depth, so that gaining or putting a lot of levels into rogues actually makes sense. Not sure if this is going to do this, but we'll see. All right, Shadow Magic Sorcerer. As a Shadow Magic Sorcerer, you deal in a form of magic that makes you deadliest in darkness. This subclass gives its sorcerer superior dark vision, as well as the ability to shadow walk between places of dim light or darkness. It also lets you call forth the perfectly homebrewed Hound of Ill Omen to harass your foes, and use Strength of the Grave to prevent you from being downed, ideal for those attempting honor mode runs. All right, superior dark vision is 24 meters of dark vision. That's what that means. And Shadow Walk is, I'm 99% sure that will be the same spell, or roughly the same spell, as the Shadow Monk has, where you can basically teleport from one dimly lit area to the other. And that's quite cool. And then this Hound of Ill Omen. So this is interesting. So this exists in D&D 5th edition as well, but I'm not sure if how similar this is going to be to it, if that's really even going to be very comparable, and so on. So I think, first of all, generally speaking, it's probably worth it to ask, like, how much does the Sorcerer subclass actually add to the Sorcerer? And it's not super much, generally, right? If you look at the Draconic Sorcerer and the, what is it called? Is it Tempest or whatever, Storm, they're not changing what it means to be a sorcerer super heavily when you pick them, right? And I think this will be similar, where this dog is hound is like not a gimmick, but also not much more than a gimmick. I don't think this is going to be a class defining feature where like, yeah, like I play the dog spec and like all the time, every single combat, it's just all about the dog, right? Where you turn into a summoning build. I don't really think so. I think you're mostly going to be a sorcerer, like most other sorcerers too, that has some extra spells on top of that, probably darkness, kind of, right? You probably have darkness, and like all sorts of like, for example, in D&D 5th edition, sorcerers have darkness without, they can cast darkness for a sorcery point, right? Or 2 sorcery points or something. So stuff like that, right? Small little things that you have here and there. And I think this dog will also be a more small thing that you can do every once in a while, and it will be helpful, it will be cool. But it's not going to be defining the gameplay of this class. In the end, you're mostly going to be a sorcerer. And the Strength of the Grave thing, that's going to be, yeah, nice, right? Like, I think it will just work pretty much as they say here. When you're downed, you go back up to 1 HP. All right, moving on to the Hexblade Warlock. So this is interesting. Hexblade Warlocks make a pact with an entity from the Shadowfell that manifests in the form of magical weapons. Curse your enemies and force their souls to do your bidding. Slay an enemy that isn't generally an element of nature, construct giant blob or already dead, and you'll be able to raise their spirit from their corpse for 10 turns. This new summon can deal necrotic damage and will rip away a chunk of your enemy's soul to provide your Hexblade Warlock with healing. This is definitely close to the Hexblade Warlock in 5th edition, but how exactly it will be implemented, I think, remains to be seen. So, first of all, you do magic weapon stuff. So the Hexblade Warlock basically can still opt, I think, into becoming a Pact of the Blade Warlock later on. So you choose Hexblade at level 1, you can still become Pact of the Blade later on, but you don't necessarily have to. But you can always pact bind weapons, so to speak, at least as long as they're one-handed weapons. And then you have a specific, so I think the way this will work is that you have a specific type of curse, or rather a specific type of hex that will be slightly different from the normal hex. And then if you kill enemies while they're hexed, you gain this this summon. You'll be able to raise their spirit from their corpse for 10 turns. So this won't be a summon in the sense that this will just then run after you for the entirety of the game and annoy you by getting stuck. No, this will be a 10-turn summon where you kill something in battle and then you gain this summon. Can be interesting, right? Like, what can you gain several of these? Can you micromanage your Warlock to gain several kills in a row, maybe with Elixir of Bloodlust, right? And then you get 1 kill, you get 2 kills, and you gain 2 of those summons, and then you can kind of overwhelm enemies. At least fun to think about. Or can you just have 1 of these summons? Who knows? How strong are they? What exactly will they do? That, I think, is open and remains to be seen, but it's definitely an interesting take on the Warlock, and I'm looking forward to seeing this in action. And finally, the Blade Singing Wizard. The Blade Singing subclass merges swordplay with wizardry. Expect new spellcasting animations when casting spells with your weapon, a new Blade Song ability to grant your supernatural speed, agility, and focus, plus gives you a bonus to any constitution saving throw you make. So you can already see at least 1 new animation here, where you have some, what is this, a dwarf or a halfling, shooting, I guess a dwarf, shooting magic missiles with their scimitar, kind of like pew, 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 pew. And this is, I think, mostly a new animation. I don't think this is a completely new spell or anything. This is a new animation for magic missile. Now, there's one thing about this that's kind of interesting, which is that you can see that this character is not holding something in their offhand. And I think that is because Blade Song wizards generally don't, well, if they hold something in their offhand, it might be another sword, but not a shield and not a two-handed weapon. So this is actually how they work in 5th edition. They can't have a two-handed weapon. They can't hold a shield. Otherwise, their blade singing stops. They're kind of supposed to be almost like dancers, kind of, where like they have to stand and kind of be free in order to keep up their blade song. And what the blade song does, it says here, it gives you speed, agility, and focus. And what this means, I think, is movement speed, armor class, and focus. The way this works in 5th edition is you gain movement speed, you gain agility in the form that it adds your intelligence modifier to your armor class. This could be very powerful if it's in Baldur's Gate, if you get to add your dexterity modifier and your intelligence modifier to your armor class. You can become very, well, not technically tanky, but very dodgy, right? And focus. So there you also have, I think, bonuses to your constitution saving, or like does concentration saving throws. So you can concentrate on spells even though, like, you know, shit's throwing at you all the time. So it's interesting. I think this looks really good, and I think it's a promising take on getting an actual sort of melee hybrid class into the game. The problem with melee hybrid classes in this game so far, especially with Eldritch Knight, is that, which is, you know, supposed to be, that's the one class where you think, oh yeah, that's the melee caster hybrid. But in reality, it doesn't really work, because the way you play this class is by like just being a fighter that like hits or maybe throws, and then you have some supporty spells on top, like shield, right, that you cast, and it's quite boring, right? It's quite passive. And you know, with something like a paladin, oh, by the way, I didn't say this when I talked about the Hexblade Warlock. Just really quick, the Hexblade Warlock gets in their spell list a lot of Paladin smites, so they kind of Paladin smite a lot. Okay, back to the Blade Singing Wizard. Also, so right, like sort of caster melee hybrids. With the Paladin too, like the issue is a little bit that you're kind of this smite bot. And while there is a lot of multi-classing between Paladin and caster classes, it doesn't feel very organic, you know? It's either like a big reason for doing it is to gain extra spell slots on your Paladin in order to just gain more smites. And of course, you can still play those other classes and what you gain from them, but it's, as I said, it doesn't really feel organic. It doesn't really feel like those classes necessarily lock into one another super well. That's my opinion. And this Blade Singing Wizard could be a really interesting take on actually getting a melee sorcerer or melee caster hybrid. They normally should get also extra attack at level 5 or level 6, probably level 6. So we'll have to wait and see what exactly comes of this. I hope that this will be an interesting form where you actually get to do this sort of slashing, casting kind of stuff, and where, you know, like that also perhaps is interesting from a multi-classing perspective. We'll see, right? Very interesting. I think I've said interesting a lot this video, because it is. I'm definitely looking forward to this a lot. I think new subclasses is definitely something, I mean, you know, this game needed in a way, right? More depth. Of course, you can always go into modding to find this, and you'll find a lot of you'll find a lot of greatly designed classes and subclasses in the modding community that are absolutely worth checking out. But it's also just super cool to see to see what Larian does with this, and of course with like the, you know, they just have the ability to do more stuff when it comes to animations, when it comes to all of this. They of course just can implement this stuff sort of deeper into the game, and that's definitely going to be super fun to see, and will open up a whole slew of new possibilities for content creators to make 600 new tier lists. Look forward to it. All right, this was my overview. I didn't go insanely deep into everything, and I didn't, you know, pull up all of these tabs. That's what I wanted to do originally, and then I noticed this would take like 6 hours. But it's, I think, an okay overview to get some understanding about what these classes are going to offer. And yeah, I hope you found this informative. If you did, leave a like and leave a comment if you have anything to add. Let's get a discussion started. Just throw everything you know, everything you think, everything you speculate about what is going to come with these classes into the comments. And yeah, have a good time. See you soon. Bye bye.